Welcome, guys, to another exciting Traction Presents. Today, we are going to be covering, it's been too long since we've had Jules on, really.
Hello. Nice to be back.
Yes, I know, exactly, yes.
I never went away. I've just not been on many of these.
No, you've just been locked in a basement somewhere coding hard, haven't you? No, so in all seriousness, no, we haven't had you on for a long time, and I thought it was about time we got you back in, hot on the heels of ADC, and just have a good chat about technology, DAWs. Where's it all going? What are we all doing? Where's it going to go? All the fun stuff, you know. Everyone knows Dave, of course, over. Oh God, he's hot on the camera there. So let's start today with a little bit of a history lesson. As we were saying backstage, we've got a lot of new users, and they may not sort of know the history of it. So, scoot your mind back, Jules, to those much younger years. When was it? Early 2000s.
Where did all this stuff come from? Well, I think it must have been 1999 even, or 2000. I had a job I really hated. And I sort of hatched this little crazy side project to write a DAW, because I was into music and I was working as a programmer, and I thought, stuff's got to be all coming together. And I think I just remember I just won a copy of Cubase something, like one of the very early 1990s.
You say won a copy?
No, I literally won a copy.
Was that a legit copy?
It was like
days of getting Cubase completely free.
I would have done that, but I can't remember where. I think it was a computer magazine where it was like, I for some reason I entered the competition. I literally did win a copy of Cubase something or other, like Light, back in, and on my old 486 PC tried to run this thing, and it was absolutely rubbish. I'm sure Cubase is much better now, but it was, and I thought, oh God, this is so bad, and this is like the market leader. Surely I can have a go at this. It can't be that hard, which is completely wrong. And so I just started tinkering away on this little side project of a DAW and put it together, and in my spare time. And I remember I sort of went part-time at work, and I was sort of beavering away, and then finally sort of launched this thing and said, okay, I quit. I'm going to actually have a go at this. And it was about 2000 or something, I guess. And it must, I don't know if I still have any original code. It must have been pretty bad in version 1, but
Dave's probably found some.
I don't know if we could even build this anymore. We should try one day just for a laugh.
Imagine pretty much everything's been rewritten.
Yeah. So, I definitely everything. I mean, the cool thing about it was that in writing it, I did a lot of programmer library stuff, and that all ended up becoming the JUCE library. So I kind of, as I was writing it, I was sort of doing the DAW code and the library code, the audio library code. So in a couple of years after that, when the guys from Mackie got in touch and said, "Oh, we were interested in having our own DAW. We like yours. Can we like do a deal on that?" I said, I made a really good decision, which was to say yes, but I'm going to keep the library as JUCE, and you guys can have the DAW, because that's what you're interested in the products, and I want the code of the library. So that worked out really well. So Mackie took over Traction in about, do you remember what that was, Woody? 2003?
I want to say 2003, yep.
And Woody became the product manager or something, some person in charge of that, back when he used to live in London. And worked at Mackie.
Actually, no, that was after I moved to America. So I think, was it?
Really?
Maybe not.
Wow.
Or maybe during the transition, because we definitely hung out in London.
Yeah, for a while. So, I remember partying at your flat a couple of times. So it must have been. But this is all very hazy now. We're going back quite a long time.
It was hazy back then, let alone.
And I'm very old. So so for a couple of years I was sort of working with Mackie and Woody and on actually doing version 2 or 3, Traction 2 maybe.
I want to say it was 2 because Rowland, who's now, of course, with us as well. He's not here today, but he's with us now. He did version 3, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's the one where I stepped out of it, and I was getting more interested in my developer stuff and JUCE. So I said, okay, had enough of this. Bye. You guys will be fine with Traction. Off you go. So I went off to do my developer thing for the next 10 years, and which
was really successful. I mean,
that's
for people who haven't heard of JUCE, like, in a nutshell, what was it? I mean, I could say everyone in the industry who's a business has probably licensed JUCE, but
it's like almost every plugin that you use is probably using JUCE inside it. Loads of audio apps use it. I mean, if you're kind of starting an indie plugin development company now, you just use JUCE to write your plugins. It's just that it found this little niche. But it was also really, for me as a programmer, it was a really fascinating thing to work on because it was like audio, but also graphics and all the different bits you need to build a whole product. So I found that much more interesting than the DAW at that stage. And I went off to do that. Ended up with that at ROLI later, and I'm no longer there. And we're back on to a new chapter. But in the meantime, while I was doing JUCE, Mackie did Traction 3, and then I think they kind of got bored. I mean, at that point, I wasn't really there, so maybe
I don't think it was a case.
What happened.
In fact, I know it wasn't a case of Mackie getting bored. It was the financial crisis. So, I mean, essentially, long story short, Mackie had sort of two sides of the business. They had the live sound side of things, selling, SRM 450 live sound speakers and live sound consoles, and they had another palette of products, for recording studios, whether it be the analog 8-bus console and then the control surfaces and all this and the other, which is why the DAW fit nicely into that world, right? It was like, okay, a DAW is part of all of this, and if you have if you have control over all of that, then you can do interesting things like everyone else does. So, but yeah, after the financial collapse, Mackie was just hit hard, and that's essentially that whole sort of division of recording products just got shelved and axed. So it languished. I mean, those people who were around back then probably remember it. It languished, and Mackie had no investment in it at all. And anyway, that's why when I came up with the bright idea of you and I collaborating and getting it back out of them, we managed to negotiate reacquiring it and getting it back into our own company again, which was back into, we were just saying backstage, 2012, so it's going to be 10 years ago next year, which is
we should have a
nuts. And
we should do
Dave
something.
joined us in the first year as well. I think it was right.
That's right.
I think we hurriedly got, was it version 4 or version 5? I forget now. We sort of hurriedly got version 4 to a state that it could run on all modern machines, and then Dave came in and became kind of chief architect of the DAW.
Yeah, I joined, I think you'd been going for about 6 months, and then I came in, and I guess me and Jules worked on it for quite a long time, and then you kind of moved off to other things, and I've been sort of steering the ship since. But me and Jules still talk about kind of the high level architectural stuff, which is good.
Yeah, and I've although after about, what was it, I joined ROLI in 2014, was it? And so I was kind of pretty much full time on that and JUCE from that point. But I did have a few forays back into the Traction code base. Like when we decided to build out the Traction engine as a developer tool, I remember spending quite a long time just getting very deep into that, sort of cutting that up and making that work. So yeah, and Dave and I catch up about architectural things, but I guess my involvement these days is all on the kind of back end side of it, and I haven't really done any of the front end DAW UI sort of UX side of things for a very long time. So I'm going to step back if there's any questions about that and let you guys.
I know it's a shame we can't dive into discussing in detail what you've been working on for the last, several years. I know you can talk in sort of high level about that and whatnot.
Well, I can talk about what I was doing at ROLI for the last few years, which is the SOUL project, which I still think is like the way that audio will be done in the future, which is about finding a way to actually accelerate the stuff with hardware. Because the title of this talk is like future of DAWs and things. I think we might be coming. It might be time to sort of go a bit full circle in terms of how we render audio. Like when DAWs first started many years ago, normal CPUs weren't powerful enough, so things like Pro Tools had accelerators with DSPs in to actually do all of the audio rendering, and then CPUs caught up, and everyone now does most of their work on the CPU. But it kind of feels like to sort of then get even more performance out of like bigger workloads now, we're kind of probably going to end up moving a bit more back towards hardware accelerated platforms. And to do that, we need a different architecture. And so that's kind of been what's been driving my my work for the last few years, and hopefully in the future as well.
And so what does that mean? I mean, in terms of kind of usability of a DAW, I mean, I think everyone sort of understands this idea of accelerators, so I can run more plugins, I think that's like the obvious sort of first thought, but there's far more you can do.
I think as well as being more powerful, if you run your audio on a dedicated piece of silicon, the really big advantage you can get there is the lower latency. Because if you're running on the computer and it's doing loads of other stuff at once, and you can never really get latency that's low enough to monitor live or anything like there's always a little bit of lag, even on a really good computer. And the more processing power you need, the harder it is to keep the latency low. We just got a comment coming in, a bit like UA Apollo. Exactly like UA Apollo, where they accelerate some of the DSP on their actually in the audio I/O box itself. And I think that kind of architecture has got to be where things are gonna head. And then maybe in another 10 years after that, it'll come around and everyone will be doing it on the CPUs again. I don't know, but in terms of actually how the audio gets rendered and played, that's my guess, and that's my kind of take on where we should be going.
Well, so wouldn't it be fair to say then, to the uninitiated in this, that because Pro Tools has been doing it and UA have been doing it for ages, what's new about that idea, and the stuff that you were beavering away on, what's kind of the difference? And
it feels like the next step from what UA and Pro Tools have done is the same kind of architecture but open. UA only run their own plugins on their I/O. You can't write a UA plugin to take advantage of that. And it feels like that's where the next logical step would be for the industry as a whole. But at the moment, we can't get there because everyone's writing their plugins using C++ and they're compiling them. And you can't get that to just randomly run on different bits of I/O. So I'm not going to get too deep into the technical side of this, because we've probably got people more interested in the higher level DAW questions. But under the hood, I think that's where we're going. I was
going to say that. I mean, that sort of summarizes in a nutshell, in that the good examples of how this tech is beneficial, but they're all very closed ecosystems.
Yeah.
And so if you buy the UA box, you can only pull from their DSP, which is a good DSP. It's a lovely DSP, but it's not really a system where I can run any plugin I want, in this ultra accelerated environment. And, so exactly, I think that would be a huge step, right?
Yeah. There's another comment appearing here. Someone said, Apple M1 processors are making UA nervous. I don't think they will be, because a faster processor isn't really what it's all about. Latency is more complicated than just going fast. Getting good latency is about it's about how people have written the plugins as well, and how people have written the code that runs on these things. And at the moment, things aren't written. I'm not going to go completely full on programming nerd here, but yeah, faster processors are great, but it's not the whole solution.
Well, I think another key part of that as a direction is making the processing and being able to create the processing much easier.
That's it. Yeah.
I remember when we visited British Grove Studios, and we were chatting to one of the engineers there. I forget the guy's name, but we were talking about this new direction, and essentially, he had been dabbling with C++, but I think one doesn't really just dabble with C++.
Exactly.
So, sort of pick up a C++ for dummies and spit out a EQ plugin in a couple of weeks.
Exactly. But there is an appetite from people like that, like sound engineer kind of level people, to just who kind of they've got an effect. They just want to tweak it a little bit. And if you're a web programmer, you can go and do that. If you're not a web programmer, but if you're kind of trying to do a website, you can tinker with a website bit because it's easy to do. But just tinkering around with a plugin is not really possible. And yeah, I agree. That's definitely there's definitely an appetite out there for making it more accessible. So yeah, people kind of want more accessible plugins and code that they can run and tweak themselves in an easier way. But they also want it to go faster, and they also want it with lower latency. So kind of solving for all those variables is kind of where we need to get to. And then the really hard problem is like once like the thing we did with Soul solves that, but then getting all of the DAWs and all of the platforms to support this is then the hard bit. So just having the perfect tech is great, but then actually getting it into a position where everyone can run it is tricky. Yeah,
I mean, so my dog's going crazy downstairs. Hopefully you can't hear that too much. he's excited about it too. But what was I going to say? Yeah, the guy. I mean, that chap. You said the appetite for tweaking stuff. I mean, it's the classic, sound engineer. At least the guys who go really pro. Back in the day where they'd have all the outboard hardware. And they would tour around studios doing mixes with their specific set of hardware. A big part of them creating their identity was tweaking the hardware, of course, which is why I think there's this natural appetite for, I want to be able to do that, but now in the digital domain, so that these guys can create their custom, unique to them, sonic signature, which I think helps in their careers. So, I mean, that's why, and it's not a new thing, as I say, it just used to be done in hardware. And I think that's why there's an appetite in digital. But so, I mean, all of that's really exciting. I mean, getting rid of latency all over the place is obviously huge. I mean, other things that we've talked about is sort of decentralizing that processing as well, right? So obviously more and more of our desktop apps are shifting to browsers. I think, obviously Microsoft run a lot of their apps in browsers now and stuff like that, which has benefits, but obviously there's huge challenges to audio when doing that. I mean, can you talk much about that?
Yeah, the problem with that is like, and I've seen a few people trying to start up companies to attempt to build a product which is like a
door. I'll be back.
To build products which are DAWs that live in the cloud, so that you're doing all the processing on a cloud machine, and you're just looking at the DAWs view in your browser. And the problem with this, I mean, it sounds great in principle, but the problem then is that you've got massive latency added, because you've not only got the latency in your local machine, but you've got to get all this audio back and forwards over the network. And that can have, if you're on a crappy Wi-Fi connection and a bad internet connection, that's huge latency. So on the one hand, that's kind of it's actually very hard to make that work anyway. But it's also inherently going to be quite bad for audio, for live audio. If you're just like throwing some beats together and listening to them and sequencing, then yeah, maybe that could work. And there does seem to be more people moving in that direction, and that's something we've been like throwing ideas around about how we could, how we could re-architect stuff that we're doing to sort of help with that sort of decentralized processing. Lots of interesting stuff going on there, and lots of potential.
I think the big thing with that kind of workflow is the immediate setup you get out of the box, because there's just so much baggage doing audio these days. You've got to get you know, you install your DAW, install a load of content, you've got to install a bunch of plugins, you've got to scan them all, figure out where they go. There's just kind of a lot of hurdles, and I think people are used to just opening a browser and just being able to do something. So
Yeah.
you know, fixing all those little annoyances, I think, is a direction.
Yeah, plugins in particular. But then the really annoying thing is if you're running your plugins on a server, you kind of, all of their interfaces have to be kind of basically video streamed to you, and all of your mouse clicks are kind of sent back to the server. So it becomes pretty clunky in a way that it's hard to get around technically.
Sorry, I have to run out there. I think I caught the tail end of it though. So I mean, seeing as we're sort of jumping around talking about possible future, you know, the Jetsons of the future sort of concepts for DAWs, you know, where we'll be in 10 years, you know, we're constantly looking, of course, and you guys are extremely stitched into the developer. I mean, Jules, you've done the keynote ADC for a number of years in a row, right? Which, again, for people on the stream who don't know what ADC is, the Audio Developer Conference, which I think ROLI started doing that and putting it together.
Yeah, we started it. It was originally the JUCE Conf, the JUCE something, JUCE Summit, and then we kind of winded it out to the audio community in general. And now it's the ADC, and I've got nothing to do with it anymore. But I turn up, and it's a great. It's like the nerdy developer conference basically for audio geeks,
which just happened just in London. What last week?
Last week.
We've apologies. I'm still very much in super nerd mode, so. Adjust the audience. Yeah, it was an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I think we can go deep today, Dave. It's all right.
Okay. Well, we did just get a question come in to say, can we talk about the creative side of the DAW and where that's going? So maybe we can kind of
let's. I'll try and de-nerd myself a bit. Yeah.
So you were talking about the technical side of things in 10 years. And the audio developer conference.
All I was going to say, and we can tackle this later, is, you know, we're constantly looking at it, and I think from a sort of a user's perspective, there's been some key areas that have been explored. You know, I mean, obviously in consumer land, we've got, you know, virtual reality that, you know, came to be a hugely exciting thing and then subsided a bit, but it's still bubbling away. You know, there is you know, the buzzwords of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and, you know, I mean, all of that is out there being, you know, marketed to hell in consumer landscape. And so I think it's just natural that when you do dream up, you know, what's the sci-fi version of a DAW in 10, 20 years time, you know, is the operator going to be needed? I mean, our DAWs just can be writing their own music, you know, it's that and the other.
God, I hope not.
Well,
that's going to be
it can do. There's some pretty compelling AI demos. In fact, there was a talk about artificial intelligence machine learning at ADC, and she gave lots of great examples of generating whole songs based on just input of, you know, entire artists' work, and then say, hey, generate me a new song like this. And they're pretty convincing, but I don't think
probably would work.
I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know if people would want to open a DAW and just press hey, give me a song like this, and then go, oh, I made a song. It's the creative process that I think people get into it for, and I guess you get splits. So some people like all the, you know, the aids and the artificial intelligence things to help you do things because they want to focus on another element, and other people want to focus on the really kind of tweaky stuff. It's why we make a range of products, right? Our synthesizers are deep and you can kind of modify any element of them, but then we also create a range that are much higher level kind of romplers for people that want to browse great sounds. So yeah, I don't know if it will necessarily go one way or the other. It will probably be kind of both, and you'll just pick the tool for what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, imagine if you had a word processor that you press a button, it'll like AI generate a novel. It's kind of missing the point, really.
Yeah, no, I think the reality is it's a long way away from being able to do that. I think there was a good documentary I watched about a team that tried to write a West End play, a musical, just completely AI, computer learning, and it was a very interesting documentary. And I think the outcome of it was, machines can generate stuff, but it still takes a lot of human intervention to cut through all the gibberish and like pick out the good stuff, which ends up being more time consuming than doing it yourself.
And it's hard to steer them. You can with a lot of these really cool looking AI examples that you see, where it'll just sort of auto generate a whole song or something. That's great, but you can't then there's no way to tell it to make the song a bit shorter or make the verse a bit longer. You can't actually edit it. It just does it. And then that's what you get. And then you change the parameter and you get a completely different thing. And so you can't actually creatively control it. You can just sort of fire it and see what comes out. So I don't know if that will ever be a solved problem or.
Someone mentioned in the comments that said tons of people would love that feature. Just looking at how many DJs use auto beat matching. I mean, I highlight that because I DJ for fun in my spare time, and I use the tempo sync features. And when I used to DJ on records, you couldn't do that, and you used to have to beat match yourself. But now I can mix with 3 or 4 decks and mix much faster. So it just takes away one element of the whole process. It doesn't kind of ruin it. If you go to a live show and someone just presses play on a set, then they'll get destroyed for not engaging with the crowd and giving something back. So just because they use one feature to help them do other things, it doesn't mean that it's completely ruining the whole aspect of the live show. And I think it's similar.
That's a very good point, Dave. I think there's definitely a continuing effort by all developers to make inherently complicated software like a full-blown DAW, right, which has thousands of features, in it. It's got a lot of capability, and to try and keep that easy to use is always kind of the hard task, and of course, and the more capabilities we put in it constantly, it's you sort of walk this path of it becoming so horribly difficult to use because you have to know thousands of capabilities. And I think that's an area of opportunity, is having that level of capability just more discoverable. And if the machine can help you discover features, or even if different ways of interacting with the machine, maybe voice commands, load me my favorite synth, stuff like that can allow you to interact with essentially the computer in a more sort of collaborative way, as opposed to swinging completely in the opposite direction, hitting a button and having the machine create an entire song. It's like, I just want to be able to interact with the machine better and have the machine understand what I'm trying to do and give me the tools. It's like my assistant in the room, as opposed to
you want the AI to do the boring stuff, not the creative stuff.
If you focus on the creative.
I'm trying to find this clip that I recorded a few days ago and I can't find it, and I'm going to spend like 10 minutes listening to think, where is it? That's the kind of boring, or I'm sort of going through a menu because I'm sure there's a way of doing a thing that I can't quite think what it is, but I can't find it. Exactly. What was it called? Is it
what was that function called that I can't quite remember?
If you can get our AI to solve those problems, then that really is a good use. And they're easier problems to solve as well.
There's another point in the comments that says, I like the chord track for instant inspiration. It also does not feel like cheating. I think that's a great example. That's not AI or machine learning, but if you were just composing something on a piano, you'd be able to play a chord and then maybe change the key, and you'll go, oh yeah, that sounds cool, and you've got that kind of instant feedback while you're working. That's a lot harder once you program something into a DAW and suddenly you want to say, oh, I wonder what a key change there sounds like, or changing a chord. So we've created tools that enable you to do that quickly, just so you can experiment. And I don't think that's cheating at all. It's just giving you the tools to kind of mimic good workflows that were possible.
Filtering out all the noise, so you can focus on exactly what what it is you're trying to achieve, which is triggering inspiration, right? I mean, as we've discussed on so many occasions, a DAW is a very complicated environment. You know, I mean, how many lines of code is a DAW, and how does it relate to sort of other apps?
It is must be one of the most complicated tools that there is. I mean,
it does
there are. I'm trying to think of anything similar. I mean, it's going to be worse than a word processor or a spreadsheet, isn't it? There's just more tools, and I mean, maybe photo editors or like Photoshop kind of level things are similar, but they're not real time.
And it evolves. I think that's another sort of key part of the DAW. I mean, MIDI is a great example, right? I mean, I don't think anyone out of any of the DAW developers has ever created like the perfect MIDI editor, although we're all trying to do it every year. And every year we get great feedback from users who are using it in a new and more novel way. And we start, adding and tweaking, and it continues to evolve. That there is no such thing as achieving the ultimate, MIDI editor.
And they're like Marmite. Some people love your MIDI editor, some people hate it. It's always no one. I don't think anyone's ever made one that everyone loves, have they?
Yeah. And in fact, actually, just to mention a quick snippet of Waveform 12 action in today's conversation, there is a bunch more MIDI stuff coming in Waveform 12. So those of you on the feed who are eager to see what's coming next year, that's going to be a big part of the release. I don't know. We're about halfway through, Dave. Do you want to throw up a quick? We're not doing any sort of official announcements today or anything like that. But Dave and the team have been beavering away on Waveform 12, and it is coming down the pipe pretty quickly early next year. So
yeah, I will jump over to that in just a sec, but I just wanted to finish up the AI conversation with a comment from Eric, who says AI is great for helping out with mixing. Things like Goldfast Soothe and the mastering assistant on Ozone 9 are good examples of AI that help making music better. I think that sums up what I was saying earlier. It's not everyone's a mastering engineer and not everyone's a mix engineer. They might just want to make some beats or put things together, but they want something that sounds half decent at the end of it. So yeah, AI done well, where it does just kind of give you that kind of head start, I think is good. And there are people like that doing great stuff with it. Okay, so just to, as Woody said, we're not going to do a full rundown of what's in Waveform 12 today, but I did want to show one thing because it's probably been the most, one of the things that's kind of been the most discussed and talked about over the years for reasons that kind of beyond me. But Yvette, can you share my screen, put it back in now? So what you can see here is our kind of refined color editor, which is back in Waveform 12. I think I don't know when you started the color editor in Traction, Jules, but in Traction 4, I think there was something like 150 colors that you could edit. And the problem we had over time was every time we wanted to add a new feature, you'd have to add a color for it. And then everyone's color schemes would get out of date. And we had these horrible situations where bits of UI would be transparent or two colors would just interact with each other to make them invisible, and it was just a mess. And I don't think I've ever seen a color scheme that looked good.
No, but people loved being able to change their color scheme.
Yeah.
And then we got some people actually making their own color schemes, and back then you had to do it with like a text editor and build this huge complicated XML file, which was really hard to write. And they were kind of managing all these, obviously going to loads and loads of trouble because it's very hard to do a color scheme with such a complicated UI. And then we started breaking it because we were trying to move on from that. And then so people got annoyed that they had color schemes they liked and we were moving on. But then it was impossible it was all too complicated to, like Dave said, to actually add new features then. So then did we at one point we got rid of them, didn't we?
We removed it in, I think it was either Traction 7 or Waveform 8, because we did a whole bunch of features and it was just impossible to add color IDs for everything and just get it to work. And sort of since that point, slowly over time, we've been kind of nudging the way colors are generated into something that's more kind of declarative. So what we've been able to do with Waveform 12 is do a color editor, but not in the same sense that Jules just described. It's more kind of hints as to your color makeup. So what I've got on the screen is the new color editor, and I kind of got together with our UI designer to figure out the parameters that can be used as input to change your look and feel, and also the biggest bits of feedback from people, which was, you know, it's too dark for my eyes, or I want a light scheme, or I want the colors brighter, or I don't want that as orange, I want it as something else. So we tried to include all of those things in the color editor, and also make everything a bit smarter at the same time. So what you can do now is you can change the hue, which is kind of your background color, the saturation, which is how much color there is, the background and the highlights, which sort of change the brightness of the background and the foreground. Then you can change the vividness, which is how bright the colors are, and you can also change what we call the primary and secondary colors, which are the kind of two colors that are used throughout the app. So with those changes, you can actually get quite a bit of mileage, and the whole thing still looks like one coherent whole. So I'll give you kind of just a quick showcase of a few of the kind of things you can do with this. These are all kind of fairly in the middle. You can go quite extreme with this, and I'm sure people will when they get it, but just to kind of show you different variety. So this is the default, which is based on the Waveform 11 color scheme. So you can just see everything kind of looks a bit sharper, but the color scheme is fairly similar. Then I don't know if you can see the difference there, but the colors are a bit more saturated and vivid in this color scheme. Here we've got an example of the primary color, which is blue in this instance, changed to a sort of orangey gold. And then a much lighter scheme, so all the kind of the black point is flipped to white, and you can kind of play around with those things. Here we've got one that has purple as the primary color, and this has got green as the secondary color, but there's not a lot of it on display. So that's kind of what we've been able to do with Waveform 12, and hopefully that fits most people's requirements, and it'd be interesting to see how extreme they get with them.
Yeah, that's great. I always kind of thought that sort of an editor was possible, but I could never quite get there. And this is Dave's been beavering away on this for a long time, and it seems to be working really well.
For those who have been with Traction for a long time, I am certain that the topic of bendy arrows will come up at some point after this. I think we got rid of the bendy arrows in version 2, Jules, right?
I can't remember. Yeah, it was
or version 3. I can't remember.
I think it was definitely a Mackie decision to get rid of the bendy arrows. I always liked the bendy arrows.
There was lots of vitriol on that one. Yeah.
Do you know what?
I've never seen back the bendies.
I've never seen the bendy arrows. I'll need to dig through the archives to see if there's some images on the web of bendy arrows.
Anyway, we're talking about the future.
Right, we won't talk about stuff from 20 years ago.
Not 20 years ago. Good Lord.
Couple of quick questions I'll just fire. If someone says we'll be able to add more than 4 plugins on the master bus, yes. I forget what the limit is, but it should fit all your master plugin needs.
That was never a technical restriction. It was just that I think we just had so much space on the UI. I think is why we made it 4. I can't really remember.
Yeah, and as the UI's shifted now, I think we just removed that limitation.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how often it comes up.
It's amazed me. I mean, obviously, prior to this, we did a new release of the DAW every year since 2012, right? Until last year, where obviously, well, we all know what we've been living through for the last year, but obviously software has been doing really well. So, we fortunately had, such a strong year, we decided to take some time out and give the engineering team time to sort of real dig deep into the code, right, Dave? I mean, it's essentially 2 years since we'd have launched a new release, and I mean, I was looking through the list of stuff that's been added, and it's really extensive. But I mean, it really is. It's a lot of just finishing stuff that we started over the years, right? It's a lot of sort of polishing and, fixing little issues and anomalies, the kind of less exciting stuff than working on a big shiny new feature, which of course there are plenty of those, but it gave us that breathing room to do all of that, right?
Yeah, we've been trying to focus on a lot of the feedback that we've had over the years when we've added features, and it'd be cool if it could do that or that. So there should be a lot of those that people will find. I think there's something for everyone in this release. Of course, the other thing that is big, as you say, on the engineering front, is I've rewritten the entire back end of the audio processing. So we kind of demoed the start of that in Waveform 11, but it's been developed further and should fix all the annoying problems that people had in the engine. Like
there's the long-running plug-in delay compensation thing that has been. I mean, we could probably do a whole hour on that, but which was never quite right from 2001 or whatever it was, and Dave's finally got it right.
It should be right now,
and all he had to do was completely rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah, and sort of bend the laws of physics. I think you explained it concisely to me at one point, Dave, in that the problem Waveform faced, or Traction before it, of course, was the fact there was no sort of fixed architecture, at all. It was completely modular, and the user could, stick processing anywhere and route stuff to any other tracks. And I mean, which was hugely, it was very fresh at the time. I mean, obviously most other DAWs have moved on to sort of copy that sort of capability, but in the early days, that was very novel. Whereas, the Cubase and Logic, you had a channel strip and you had fixed slots, you had a fixed number of slots, and you had sends in specific places. It's much more like an analog console, and doing delay compensation in that environment is so much more simple because kind of what the signal flow is going to be. Its restrictions and stuff. But completely modular, where you can just route everything everywhere. I mean, I remember when you were writing, I mean, it did literally feel like you were bending the laws of physics to try and create time machines to try and figure all of that out and have it work.
It's all, as you say, it's just all the ways that we can route stuff around. And I was just writing test after test of, okay, what if someone has multiple tracks that are in submixes going into another track as a destination? Or what happens if you have a track being used as a sidechain input, or an aux send going to multiple tracks at different points in the signal flow? What if you have a rack that's on multiple tracks at different points in the signal flow with inputs from different tracks, some that are being sent from other tracks and some that have inputs from other tracks? Yeah, it's just a nightmare. But I think all of those cases should work now because it's all handled in kind of one generic format. And the whole audio engine is almost completely separate from the rest of our model, which is good.
And just in case we don't hammer that engine in Waveform, I don't know if people know, but we actually license out the actual audio engine called the Traction engine for other developers to use as the back end to other DAWs and other, not just DAWs, but other audio products in general. So as well as us doing crazy things with it, people out there are doing even crazier things with it that we didn't think of. So I mean, how many developers we got out there using it now? Must be a few hundred. So there's
a lot, doing a whole range of things, from using it as just test beds for setting up projects because it's a real quick way to test your plugin with a bunch of different inputs, to people building massive projects on it. But it was good at the ADC to just hear how many people kind of came up and said, oh, I'm using it, or can it be used for this, or it sounds like the right fit for this. And almost every single person is doing something completely different with it, which is the really interesting thing. Which also makes my job a lot harder to try and figure out what to spend the time on. But It's good. Yeah, it should just make everything better. That
Actually, that was something we touched on before we went live, was the whole sort of education side of things, Dave. I mean, obviously you came from being a lecturer in education, having gone through education yourself, and I mean, back when I grew up, I don't think you could go to a university and elect to do a audio programming specific, course at that time. But obviously now you can, right? I mean, education's completely changed and you get this specialist. So, I mean, are you seeing a big increase in the number of, programmers who are coming out and are doing interesting development?
I think so. I think there's kind of two things. The best place that I kind of get vibes on this is probably the JUCE forum, and I don't know if it's just how kind of good JUCE has got and it's being used for lots of other things now, but the forum seems to be way bigger than it ever was, and particularly with people new to audio programming or that have perhaps done it at university. There's also many new avenues that people perhaps have an interest in, artificial intelligence or something like that, but dip into the programming side because they can now, whereas before it would kind of be knocking things together in other frameworks. There's a whole bunch of web developers or people from the web side of things that are now able to access audio elements with the new web, what are they called, web audio modules, things like that. So I think there's just a lot more entry points into audio tech in general. So there's a lot more crossover, which is great because having more people from different backgrounds gives a lot more interest into the area and gives kind of spawns new ideas. But it's also a lot harder to figure out, what do I focus on? What do I do well? Because there's so many different areas now. And I guess Traction Engine and obviously Waveform, which is a big front end to that, kind of sits in the middle in that it's now a tool that people can use to realize their ideas. So I don't know if there was a question there or I just rambled for a bit.
I was going to say, there's a lot of similarities between JUCE, of course, and what that did for plugin developers. The DAW engine is now, it's obviously, a lot more to the DAW engine than there was to the JUCE library. But, as you said, we're finding there's lots and lots of people who are needing the capabilities or some percentage of the capabilities of a DAW to do some real weird and wonderful stuff. So yeah, that's definitely exciting. Obviously being such I would say we're completely sort of developer forward business, we don't spend a whole hell of a lot on marketing. All of our revenue and money goes back into engineering and development, and we're very stitched into that community, whether it's representing plugin developers via our Traction Presents program, which for guys in the live stream who aren't familiar with it, it's essentially we assist bedroom plugin developers who are not doing it as their full-time job to bring interesting and cool products to market. Stuff like Abyss that we just launched recently, and Hyperion and Spacecraft, and our original one that we did with Taiho and Rob, obviously Wave Razor, all super unique. There's lots of creative freedom and sort of uniqueness that comes from that indie community, I think, and that really resonates with us personally. And that's whether it's the plugins or the DAW engine, it's really interesting to be stitched into that community. And I think we get a lot of inspiration from that too. So, all right,
we had a couple of
last.
Yeah, a couple of questions that we should probably go back to. Someone said, where can they get a t-shirt? I want to know that.
You know what? We've talked so many times over the years. I only make t-shirts when we go to the trade shows. We only do enough for us. And they're really expensive, because we do them in small batches. I get them on whatever the, mainstream t-shirt production place here in America. They're like $40-50 each. So, I don't know if anyone wants to spend that amount of money on a Traction t-shirt, and we've never had a store, but we've talked about it a few times. So maybe we'll do some.
Maybe we should put some.
There are how many people would buy them if we did.
Exactly. And what sizes?
There are these sort of online stores where you can, what was that, the big one, Cafe Press or something, where you can kind of upload your designs and people can order them on demand. Maybe we should stick some designs on one of those.
Yeah.
Some classics.
We have talked about that. It's just
again, I mean, we're an engineering forward business.
Well, we should become a team.
It's a good sort of director of marketing.
You were Woody. You were at Mackie. Didn't they used to make like most of their revenue from speaker bags?
No, they used to make most.
Is that just what they told me in the pub?
Yeah, that's what they told you. Well, no, I mean it's not entirely untrue in that they made all of their money off of like the SRM 450. I think at one point we figured out that the number of SRM 450s they sold, you could put them end to end and they'd loop round the moon and back to Earth again or something ridiculous, No, they just sold a shitload of those, but excuse my French. But anyway.
Oh, and someone's saying, and stickers. And actually, I'll tell you another cool thing. Stickers, actually, I used to
stickers. We just didn't put them on the website. But
the other thing
is at a trade show when
for our next trade show as well. An idea I picked up last week at ADC. Someone there he'd got temporary wet on tattoos made with his logo, and it was like, I've just got to get some of those.
But did you get one of his?
Yeah, I've got some of his. My 5-year-old son.
Did you actually apply?
I didn't put one on myself yet, but there's someone in the household who likes that stuff.
The kid, yeah. Oh dear. All right. Any other questions coming in?
There was another one.
Paul Crane said, "Any Raspberry Pi news?" Dave, you're probably best to handle that one. Roland is our sort of Pi guy, for want of a better phrase.
I don't really know what news there is. There's a new Raspberry Pi out, isn't there? There's the 4.
Yeah, there's a new really powerful one out that's supposed to be really good.
They're really powerful.
Roland typically will sort of do a build for it and check it all runs and whatnot. It hasn't come up in the dev meeting for a while, so.
Oh, it's more just another platform that we have now, but I don't think there's anything specific Raspberry Pi related. But I mean, if anyone's using it on the Pi, write something in the chat. Let us know what you're using it for. Is it just your main work?
He might have been asking about actual Raspberry Pis, though. I don't know if he means the computer or actual food, because he has spelled it Pi.
He has spelled it as Pi. So. I don't have any Raspberry Pi news.
I mean, the Pi, when we first sort of launched the Pi, just a bit of background on that, was when we first launched the DAW engine. And it was really a sort of a demonstration of what could be done on essentially a almost free computer. I mean, what was it, $35 or something stupid at the time you could buy the board for. And it was just, it was like for businesses that wanted to embed, essentially, capabilities of a DAW, which, could be anything from, the brains of a digital mixer to, all sorts of different things, that was sort of a demonstration of like, look, this runs surprisingly capably on these systems. So, we've kind of kept it up since. I know occasionally we get some good sort of, posts on the forum, people using it, but it's still such a tiny sort of slice. But again, a very intriguing one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really just, I think we, like Woody says, we mainly did it because it was cool to get it running on one. I'm not sure why you'd use one.
I think there's just a little tidbit.
Michael, you cheeky bastard.
It did help us get to the Apple M1s quickly, though, because everything ran on ARM. So we just had to make it work with the Apple M1s, and we had native M1 pretty quickly. Yeah. So that ironed out ARM.
We've got another question here. Any support for NI Machina controllers? I guess that should be Machina. I don't know, really.
No, because I haven't looked into it, and I don't know what the kind of demand is. I mean, if everyone really wants Machina controllers, maybe we'll add something.
That's the thing. Supporting controllers is really hard work. I remember I originally wrote the Mackie control support way back in the day, and God, it was so difficult to do, and it's just so time consuming. And then supporting it as time goes on. The more controllers you have, and the more you have to kind of make sure they all still work, which is very, very difficult because you have to have them all and actually try them. So
at some point we'll make our own.
We should make our own, and then we'll have to support that, and it'll be even worse.
Which is why I got into software development, because all you need is a laptop or a computer, and that's it. And then I joined audio, and now my room is just full up of big chunky audio stuff that I have to plug in at some point or other.
Well, actually, my room now is so free of music gear. It's amazing these days. I just I don't even have any desk speakers here. I've got a laptop. I've got a little ROLI keyboard, which I can't play, but I sort of need to test that. Keep notes are going in occasionally, so I sort of go, and that's really it. And a pair of headphones and the ukulele. But yeah, I'm very slimmed down these days, very minimal, very decluttered.
All right. Well, I think on that fine note, I think we've probably come to an end today, unless there's any last minute questions coming in. Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you, Yvette, posting. Yeah, of course, we've got our Black Friday sale on at the moment. It is our biggest of the year. So, if you are looking to get any of the new products, go grab it. If you haven't got Waveform 11, now's a great time to get on that. And so when 12 comes out, you'll be eligible for the upgrades next year. Yeah, I think that's...
There's a couple more questions we should probably squeeze in here. There's one here, 758, about Hyperion, Abyss, Wave Razor. All of them are superb. Thank you very much. More in the pipeline?
Absolutely.
I don't know. Do we have any more? I don't know if we've got any more.
Yeah. There. Yeah. I think it'd be hugely popular. There's going to be a follow-up to Abyss. Peter is beavering away on that. There's in fact, he's got several products in the pipeline. So I think we're all excited about those, because it's he's sort of hit a bit of a home run with Abyss in terms of visual interest, tweakability, accessibility, all of that good stuff. So we're kind of keen, all happy to see where that one goes. And talking about accessibility, I think I just saw something about Waveform and visually impaired accessibility, speech input and stuff like that. Dave, I know you've thought about that.
Yeah, it was a big thing at ADC, actually. There was a lot of talks on accessibility and what companies are doing to kind of move towards that. And it's something that is particularly hard for a DAW because there's so many controls. But I think we're going to start kind of figuring out what the first steps are, and then kind of engage with the community to kind of gradually improve stuff over time. I think that's the only way we can do it. The big stumbling block for us before was that JUCE didn't have accessibility layers, so you couldn't interact with the operating system screen readers and things like that. And they added that fairly recently in JUCE 6.1 or 2 or something. So we have the tools to kind of go down that now. So hopefully, some stuff coming on that soon.
Awesome.
More requests for t-shirts.
Yeah.
And with the cat's bum facing the camera, that means that's the signal to say that our time is up.
Exactly. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a Merry Christmas, and look forward to launching some new stuff very early in the new year.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cheers.
Okay. Thanks very much, guys.
Bye.